It's another month, so let's look back at all the films and TV shows that I watched in the month of March, starting with Kung Fu Panda. I wanted to watch all of these films for the fourth film that came out later last month. I have a lot of nostalgia for this first film. I used to have this one on DVD and I used to watch it all the time. And it's just as good as I remember on Rewatch. There's just so many genuinely funny moments in here that work so well because of the semi-stylized animation, which feels pretty ahead of its time. The voice performances are so fun as well. Jack Black is just so likeable as Poe. The action is surprisingly memorable and fun as well, due to the editing and set pieces involved with them. It's also pretty short, at 90 minutes as well, so it feels like a very rewatchable film. I just really love it. I give it a 9. And then I watched Dune Part 2 in the cinemas. I've already done an unscripted movie review on this, so I'll keep it really short. It really surprised me. I liked it a good amount more than the first. I was just more invested in what was going on here, and I felt like it built on characters more, and I found characters more likeable in this second film. And then I watched Kung Fu Panda 2. This is a very solid second film that got surprisingly dark in some points. I like how it dug into Poe's backstory, and you've also got an amazing villain played by Gary Oldman who just feels so threatening. I don't think the visuals or the action slapstick are done as well here, probably due to the directorial changes between the films, but there's still some fun action and some really beautifully edited scenes. I don't know what else to say, it's just a really solid sequel. I give it an 8. And then I watched Monster. This is a 2023 film that I heard a lot of praise for, so I gave it a watch. I'm not really the biggest fan of hyperlink films, but this film did it really well. The story being told is just really intriguing in the first half, and it feels like everyone is hiding something. And then as more and more of these characters' actions are revealed, I started sympathising more and more for these characters who seem very unlikable at the start. The acting, especially the child acting, is great in here as well, and you really feel the relationship between these two characters. I also thought the script was so investing, and I just love how lines of dialogue come back around and make you go, oh, I get what's going on now. I just really liked it. I give it a 9. And then watched Still, a Michael J. Fox story. This is a documentary that I was really interested in seeing after hearing about it, because I didn't really know much about Michael J. Fox's life story apart from him getting Parkinson's, but this was an overall really interesting documentary. I like how it uses archive footage along with footage with actors to tell the story, and it's overall just really well edited. I really didn't know much about Parkinson's as a disease as well, and I like how it shows how it affects the body and how Michael J. Fox manages to live with it. Some aspects of his life actually feel like a movie, and it's just, again, so interesting seeing this man's rise in the 80s and the stuff with Back to the Future to his diagnosis and how he hid it from the public. It's just so, it's all so interesting. Yeah, I just really loved it. I give it an 8.5. And then I watched Demon Slayer Mugen Train. I watched the ARC version of this instead of the movie, but I decided to get back into Demon Slayer with this, and it's pretty good. I like the first demon in here and how they have the power to trap people in their dreams. I found it to be a really interesting concept, and I think it was done really well. The final fight in here was pretty epic as well, even though I think it was drug out a bit. The animation is great as always, and I like these characters. It's just a good arc. I give it an 8. And then watched Ferrari, and this was really boring. I just felt like the script was so dry. The editing was just really odd in moments as well, and the racing scenes were just not as engaging as I wanted them to be because of that. I thought Adam Driver did a decent performance, and that third act absolutely left me gobsmacked with that one scene. If you've seen the film, you know what that one scene is. But I just overall thought it lacked any flavour or anything to make it stand out amongst other biopics like this. I give it a 6. And then watched Kung Fu Panda 3. This was alright. This was one of those films where I watched it in cinemas, but I don't remember a thing from it, so I'm counting it as a first time watch. I just thought the writing wasn't as good in this film. The pacing also grinds to a painful halt when Poe arrives at the Panda Island, and then it's just him and his dad goofing about for a good amount of the film. I just don't think it built out the villain enough as well and established him as enough of a threat. He just shows up a few times and then gets killed by Poe, which is a big shame because he's played by J.K. Simmons, who's one of my favourite actors ever. I like a lot of the stuff between Mr. Ping and Poe's dad, and a lot of that is very fun and sweet at times. I just think it's a bit of a step down, and I just didn't really like how it ended. I don't know, I give it a 7. And then I watched Orion And The Dark. This is another DreamWorks film that just so happened to have the same screenwriter as my favourite film of all time, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And you would not know that from watching this film, because I didn't like a lot of the writing in it. I like Orion as a character and how he starts off very paranoid, and kind of like the character of Beau from Beau's Afraid. I also like these stupid supernatural characters who come out at night, and there are some funny moments involved with their characters, especially when it reveals how sleep works in this universe. But the flash forwards are just so frustrating in this film, and they kind of feel like an excuse for bad writing, as they're now making it seem like a dad's just telling the story, and now the daughter's telling the story, so she can just randomly appear and help Orion, and it just becomes so messy, and I just really hated that aspect. The third act just completely ruined the film for me. Characters are just coming back to life really stupidly, and concepts are just introduced so quickly. It's just so rushed. But the rest of the film can be cute and fun, and I didn't mind the animation. I do think it looked good for a straight to Netflix animated film. I give it a 6. And then I rewatched Logan. Obviously I'm rewatching the Deadpool films and Logan for Deadpool and Wolverine, and this is just as phenomenal as I remember it being. It just works so well as Logan's swan song, and it finishes his character arc perfectly. I really love the future setting as well, and I'd say the action is some of the best in the X-Men franchise. There's so many well written and emotional moments that are just so devastating because of how they've been built up in previous films, and I feel like all the filmmakers behind this film really understand these characters, maybe even more so than Ryan Reynolds understands Deadpool. It's just near perfect. I just don't know what else to say. I give it a 9.5. And then I watched Perfect Days. This was nominated for Best Foreign Film at the Oscars, so I gave it a watch and I really liked it. It's just a very simple story about a toilet cleaner who appreciates life maybe more than he should. It's just really interesting seeing him taking these little things as he goes about his day. And I also found it really interesting how toilets are designed in Japan as well. You got so many differently designed toilets, whilst here we just have a square eyesore of a building. I also like this guy's taste in music and how he always relies on cassettes to listen to his music. This film made me actually want to start collecting cassettes. I did find it to drag for a lot of the first half as we're just seeing this guy's day-to-day life, but overall it's a pretty wholesome film. I give it a 9. And then I watched Society of the Snow. There's another Best Foreign Film nomination, and I just thought it was really solid. There's a lot of hard to watch moments in this film, mainly because of the thought of being in this situation and what these people have to do to survive. It's just really crazy that this is based on a true story and so many people manage to survive. The acting from everyone here is great, and it does a great job at making you feel like these people are really suffering through the makeup and practical effects. I do think it becomes a bit melodramatic in moments, and the pacing feels a bit rushed during the final act, but overall it's just really solid. I give it an 8.5. And then I watched the Oscars 2024. This is the first ever Oscars ceremony that I've watched, and it was pretty good. I didn't really like Jimmy Kimmel as the presenter, and he made some really awful jokes in that first opening monologue, especially the ones directed at Robert Downey Jr. The jokes from the award announcers were much better. I thought the performances really solid for the most part as well, with the I'm Just Ken performance just being the most fun thing I've seen ever, probably. And then obviously you got the winners, who I all think were pretty predictable but deserved picks. I do think Killers of the Flower Moon should have got more recognition, and the fact that the Iron Claw wasn't nominated for anything really grinds my gears. But apart from that, I'm happy with the people who won. I was also watching the UK version of the show, obviously, so when they would cut to the usual ad break on ABC in the US, it would cut to Jonathan Ross and just an awful panel talking about what just happened, and I was just constantly skipping those bits because they were just absolutely terrible. But apart from that, it was a good show. And then I watched Robot Dreams. This is nominated for Best Animated Picture at the Oscars, and I just absolutely loved it. I really loved the story between these two people and how they seemed perfect together before something happens that causes them to separate. It's a pretty simple story, but it feels like an allegory, I guess, for so many things in life, and I just love how it's done. I thought the animation was also simplistic but nice to look at and really colourful. I really love the jazzy soundtrack for a lot of it as well, and the use of Earth, Wind and Fire's September is just perfect in here. It's implemented in here so well, and actually made me pretty emotional near the end. It's really great, and it's my favourite film of the year so far, really. And then I watched Drive Away Dolls. I want to say that I was disappointed in this film, but I didn't really have any high hopes for it in the first place because I'm not familiar with anyone involved in this film apart from Matt Damon and the girl from Lady Bird, and also Pedro Pascal as the penis collector. It was just fine. I like how it tries to be ambitious with the filmmaking, and there are some shots that look really good, but then there's some filmmaking decisions that just baffle me. Like the transitions that are used in here look like they're taken straight out of Microsoft PowerPoint. I didn't mind the story, although I wasn't that invested in it. I like the two main characters and how things escalate with them over the course of the film, and it's also under an hour and a half, which I'm appreciative for, so it's fine. I give it 7. And then I watched The Silence of the Lambs. I knew how iconic this film was before going in, and I've seen references to it and everything, obviously. And after watching it, I get why it became so popular when it came out. First of all, there's so many great performances in it. Obviously, the big standout being Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. It's just an absolutely iconic performance, and I like how he manages to help this main character track down Buffalo Bill. The final act was just some of the most tense cinema I've seen, and I just loved it. I just don't know what else to say. I give it 9.5. And then I rewatched Deadpool 2, again for Deadpool and Wolverine. I rewatched the Super super duper cut of this. I was debating on which cut to watch, but I've heard each cut has their flaws, so I just decided to go with the longer cut, which is the one I've watched previously as well. I just think this is a really good sequel that is maybe slightly better than the first. The jokes in here just improved, the action's a bit more improved, and I just found Wade to be just a lot more likeable in this film than the first. There are some generally emotional moments in here as well, like with Wade and Vanessa in heaven. I thought those moments were just really well done. I love Cable in here as well. I don't think it's as rewatchable as the first, but it's great. I give it 8.5. And then I finished watching Regular Show Season 1. I wanted to get round to this show for a long time, and after getting round to it, it's just a really unique and really well made show with just some really weird and wacky concepts. Mordecai and Rigby are just so likeable as characters, along with all the side characters. And the non-serialized format just works really well for a show like this. I give it a 9. And then I watched The Greatest Night in Poop. This is a documentary that I was interested in about the making of We Are the World and how that song came together. I really disliked the song, but this documentary was really interesting. The behind the scenes stuff in it was so great. I just love seeing how all of these legends interacted with each other and recorded this song. I didn't even know that Lionel Richie played such a big part in it, along with Michael Jackson. And the interview footage of him recalling it is really interesting and great. It's just a very well edited documentary. I liked it. I give it an 8. And then I watched Futurama Bender's Big Score. I said I didn't want to go back to Futurama after season 5, but I heard this movie was actually pretty good. And I do really think it's a good comeback for the show. The writing's still as good as always, and there's some really good twists and turns, especially involving Fry and Leela. The time travel aspect is also very fun, and it ends on a very interesting cliffhanger. I liked it. I give it an 8. And then I watched Spaceman. This is a Netflix film that I heard decent things about, and it was decent. I like the interactions between the Adam Sandler Spaceman and the Paul Dano Spider, and there were some fun moments involving them, but the rest of this film was pretty boring. The whole stuff with Adam Sandler's wife and her being pregnant was just so unneeded, and they didn't even build a character up enough for me to care about her. I just found the script to be so dry as well. It's about a spaceman meeting a big giant alien spider, and somehow there's no comedy in here at all. If it just had like the tinsy, winciest bit of comedy, this film would have been so much better. Especially since Adam Sandler's actually a comedian. Even in some of his more serious roles like Uncut Gems, there was still some humour in there. Yeah, it's just so dry. It's just really dry. I just don't really have anything else to say. I give it 6. And then I watched Bob Marley One Love. This was overall a pretty good biopic. I thought Kingsley Benedict did a great job at playing Bob Marley, and I found it really interesting seeing his backstory and how he managed to make it big in all these countries. I do think it decided to focus on the wrong parts of his story, and it didn't delve into enough stuff like the recording sessions and how he wrote songs and how he struggled with cancer. It hardly focused on that at all. I didn't really know much about the story going in, and I came out wanting to know more. All the story points it did focus on in the film were very well written and really well acted, and I did find myself very invested for a majority of the film. It's good. I give it a 7.5. And then I watched Sherlock Holmes. There's a pretty good period piece from Guy Ritchie, which I haven't really seen him do. The performances from most people are fun, and it's just so interesting hearing Robert Downey Jr. with a British accent. I thought the slapstick was really well done here, and it just felt like some classic Ritchie action injected into this old-timey setting. I wasn't the biggest fan of the plot, and all of that doesn't actually turn out to be supernatural. It just gets way too convoluted and messy with all these things going on with the villain and all the people around him. But it's fun. It's fun. I give it a 7.5. And then I watched the sequel, A Game of Shadows, and I thought it was alright. I like the chemistry between Holmes and Watson more in this film, along with the action, the slapstick, and the comedy. But I just thought the plot and the villain were even more forgettable than in the first film. I can't actually remember what he did in the film, even though I watched it a few days ago. Even when I've written the script, I couldn't recall anything that the villain did. So I give it a 7. And then I watched Hannibal. This is a pretty good sequel to Silence of the Lambs. Obviously it's a massive step down, and I do think the pacing is a bit odd for the first act, and Julianne Moore is just not as good of a Clarice as Jodie Foster. I do still think Anthony Hopkins puts in a great performance again though, and all the stuff in Florence with this guy finding out about him and trying to get his reward for catching Hannibal, but you don't know if Hannibal's one step ahead of him or not. All that stuff is really tense, and I really love that. And then of course you got that scene in the kitchen that kind of actually disturbed me. It's a genuinely disturbing scene, and it's done really well. And again, Anthony Hopkins just does such an unpredictable and threatening performance as Hannibal that just makes me on edge every time he's on screen. I give it a 7. And then I watched Lisa Frankenstein. This is directed by Robin Williams' daughter, Zelda Williams. Robin Williams is one of my favourite comedians, so I definitely had high hopes for this film, and it may have surpassed them. I really love this film. The style of this film is just so great. I just love films that are set in the 80s, and this film just doesn't hold back back on that 80s setting. The costumes, the props, even Lisa's bedroom is just so memorable and of the time. I love the absurd and the kind of dark comedy this film has as well, and you're really rooting for Lisa and her zombie boyfriend, even though they're doing all these absolutely horrific acts. I love how it develops Lisa's character over the course of the film and how she starts to feel more comfortable in her own skin. I thought Catherine Newton just did a great job here. I've only really seen her in Quantum Mania before this, where she didn't make a great impression, but her performance in this film was so fun. I just love the physicality and facial expressions of the guy who plays the zombie as well, and the way his character progresses over the film is just so fun to watch. I just find it overall to be an extremely rewatchable experience. And yes, I think it's better than Dune 2. I'm sorry, I give it an 8.5. And then I watched The Matrix. Yes, I watched this film for the first time, finally, and it's just as iconic and memorable as everyone makes it out to be. The writing in here is amazing, and I love how this concept is built out and expanded on. It's just such an interesting concept in general, with this being a simulation, and in reality we're in a world where artificial intelligence has taken over. You've also got some of the most iconic scenes in cinema ever, like the bullet time sequence. I do think maybe some moments and lines of dialogue can get a bit cheesy, but it's near enough perfect. I give it a 9.5. And then I watched The Matrix Reloaded. I thought the sequel was fine. I just think it's a massive step down from the last film, and I just wasn't that interested in where the story was heading. I think the action scenes in this film might top the first though. There's just so many visually amazing scenes in this film with really fun set pieces, but then it cuts to a scene with dialogue and I just found myself to be bored again. I think it develops everyone's characters pretty well, and some of the new characters introduced, like the ghost people, are pretty fun, but overall it's just a not as good follow-up. I give it a 7. And then I watched The Matrix Revolutions. This is just not a great final film in the trilogy in my opinion. I thought it focused on the side characters way too much, and all the real world stuff got a bit boring after a while. I did really love all the stuff in The Matrix, and we hardly get any of that here. Neo doesn't have enough screen time as well, and he doesn't have a satisfying ending for his character. I don't think the film as a whole has a satisfying ending, to be honest. It just wraps everything up in a very odd way. There were some aspects I really loved though, like the train station thing acting as a kind of purgatory between the Matrix and the real world. That was really interesting. I also thought the final fight between Agent Smith and Neo was great. I really loved that. But everything else is just boring and uninteresting in my opinion. Probably because I think Neo and the Matrix are the most interesting parts of the film, and we don't get a lot of that in here. So I'll give it a 6. And then I finished watching Regular Show Season 2. This is another really great season of the show. I'm just growing on all of these characters more and more. I just love the weird and wacky concepts from episode to episode. And Skips is definitely my favourite character. I just love Mark Hamill as a voice actor. I give it a 9 again. And then I watched Matrix Erections. This surprised me with how good of a legacy sequel this is. I think it's better than the other sequels. I know it's very divisive, with many people loving it and many people hating it, but I liked it. I like how it gets pretty meta near the start, with the whole game developing aspect representing the previous Matrix movies. I really love the focus on Neo and Trinity's relationship in this film as well, which the original trilogy didn't really focus on at all. Neil Patrick Harris was just so fun as the villain as well. He's just always so great in the villain role. I do think the new characters introduced in here weren't that interesting, and they just weren't fleshed out enough for me to care about them, and there were some weird bursts of humour that I did feel like were a bit out of place, but at the same time the other sequels did feel a bit dry and lacking humour, so I did appreciate the humour in here. I thought it balanced the real world stuff and the Matrix stuff out as well as the original, and overall I really liked it. I give it an 8. And then I started watching the MonsterVerse films with Godzilla. I thought it was a very solid first film in the MonsterVerse. I like how it presents a lot of stuff with Godzilla and the villain from a ground level, and how it affects the humans, although it might focus on the humans a bit too much. I really like Bryan Cranston's character in this film, and then they killed him off in the first 30 minutes. I really love the final act when Godzilla and that other creature were fighting in the city, but then it would cut back to Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, and I would become very bored. It's overall a very mixed bag, but I liked it more than I disliked it. I give it a 7. And then I watched Kong Skull Island. This film actually had human characters that I actually cared about, because they're introduced pretty well, and it feels like we're exploring this island with them. There are some cheesy, almost MCU lines of dialogue here, which is ironic because like 5 of the actors in this film end up starring in MCU films, or they've already starred in MCU films. The deaths here are just what make this film for me. There's just some deaths that come absolutely out of nowhere, and there's some actually shockingly brutal deaths for a PG-13 film. I really like Kong in this film, and how how he's kind of the protector of this island. I'm an alien boy, and I really like all the unique creatures on this island as well. It kind of reminds me of Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2, which is a pretty obscure reference, but it just gave me the same vibes as that film. Yeah, I give it an 8. And then I watched Red Dragon. This was a surprisingly good prequel to Silence of the Lambs. I know the book this film is adapted from is also adapted in the film Manhunter, but that film doesn't share any of the same actors as this like trilogy, so I think I'm going to say that film for Halloween. I just love Ralph Fiennes as the villain here. I like how it focuses on him more than Hannibal in this film. I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion, but I kind of liked his character more than Buffalo Bill. Other people have said this, but Hannibal is kind of a flanderized version of himself in this film, and the film is really reliant on callbacks when it comes to his character, but Anthony Hopkins still managed to make him a threatening presence, and I really love that flashback at the start. I also liked Edward Norton as this really good detective. It's just overall really good. I give it an 8.5. And then I watched Godzilla King of the Monsters. This is overall not really good. First of all, there's some really good shots in here, and what we see of the fight between Godzilla and the Hydra is great, but everything else is so unbelievably boring. There's just no new ideas when it comes to this film. Everything's so predictable with constant cliches, and they of course focus on the human characters way too much, to the point where it just becomes infuriating. I just found the colour grading to feel so flat compared to Skull Island as well, and some scenes just feel like a complete CGI mess. This is kind of what I was fearing with the MonsterVerse films. I give it a 5. And then the final thing that I watched last month was Godzilla Vs Kong. This is another film where the human stuff is kind of boring, and there's way too much like MCU kind of dialogue, if you know what I mean. It just gives me MCU vibes, like modern MCU vibes with the dialogue being said. The stuff with Kong is just kind of boring as well, with him getting moved from place to place, and we hardly get any Godzilla, but that final act really saved the film for me. It's just amazing seeing these two titans battle it out, and I thought the Mechagodzilla was great in here as well. I did say I didn't like the human stuff, but I thought they improved on Millie Bobby Brown's character from the last film and made her a lot more likeable, and I like the side plot with her, the podcaster, and the guy from Deadpool 2 breaking into this high-tech place where something evil is going on, and I thought that was kind of fun. The other humans though, I didn't care about at all. Overall, I enjoyed it. I thought the third act was amazing. I give it a 7. So that is all the films and TV shows that I watched in the month of March. I'm currently watching Regular Show Season 3. I'm only a few episodes in, but I'm still enjoying the show. I literally just realised this, but I missed out that I'm currently watching Part 2, Season 2 of Invincible. I'm still really loving the show. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you didn't like it, please dislike it. Bad company, get things together. Bad company, get things together.